Okay. Welcome to Calling All Outdoor Nature Experts. ECE needs your help. My name is Sarah Coles, and I'm the Executive Director of Texas Children and Nature Network, and we're excited to have you with us today. We are recording our session today. Thank you so much for joining us. Please mute yourselves and turn off your cameras for the presentation to save bandwidth for all of our attendees. And for a clean recording, we ask everyone to also have their cameras off. I'll be monitoring the chat so you can share your questions there, and I'll share them with our presenters. Please remember to keep the comments in the chat kind. Ashley is running tech for us today. Thank you so much, Ashley. As I said, we are recording, and I'll share the recording in a follow-up email. If you're uncomfortable with your name showing, you can change your name to anonymous and then private message Ashley with your name for attendance. Also, if your Zoom name doesn't match the name you registered with, please change your name or let me know. If you're in need of a certificate and we do not have your name, and we will not be able to provide you with a certificate. And just a reminder, if you're needing your certificate, go ahead and follow the directions that were in the email that you got this Zoom link in from. I'm going to go ahead and welcome our speaker today. Jodi Nerren is with A&M AgriLife Extension. Thank you so much for joining us, and take it away.
Get my unmute button to work here. Hi, everybody. I am Dr. Jodi Nerren with the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. So I'm going to have lots of questions for you and ask you to answer lots of things in the chat. And we're going to practice that today by having you answer who is already familiar with extension in some form or fashion. You can give a smiley face, or you can say yes or no. I see a thumbs up. All right, so we have some folks that are familiar. Is there anybody who's on with us who doesn't know what AgriLife Extension is? Even if you don't, I'm probably not going to explain it fully because it's really complicated, but it's helpful to know that we have a little bit of background information. One thing to know is I work in Extension's Family and Community Health Unit, which is where we focus on human sciences. So I lead our Promoting Early Education Quality Initiative, which is a collection of programs that are all aimed at bringing research and evidence-based practices into early childhood education settings. We want to give young children the best possible start at lifelong health and well-being by working through those settings where they spend the majority of their waking hours, which is early care and education. So the beauty of working in human sciences with an extension, though, very specifically, is that I also have access to tons of folks with a wide range of expertise. So if you are familiar with extension, you may have worked with extension through plants, you may have worked with extension through wildlife, you may have worked with extension through natural resource conservation, through parks and recreation, and I have access to all those wonderful colleagues who can kind of inform the work that we're doing. And one of my very favorite things to do in the whole wide world is to think about how we can all work together so we can, our powers combined, make the world a better place. So I am particularly excited about our topic here today because I think this is the same idea. How do we put all of our heads and hearts and minds together and leverage all of our superpowers to make the world better now and into the future? Unfortunately, I'm going to start with the bad news. So we have some not so fun facts to share here. These are statistics from the National Health Interview Survey, which show increasing trends in screen time and obesity, and time outside decreasing. You can see the statistics that are listed here are very specifically looking at what do we see with young children. So when we talk about young children, we'll talk about this more later, but we're talking about those first few years of life. So we have almost 13% of our children aged 2 to 5 affected by obesity. About 47.5%, almost 48% of children in that age range are spending more than 2 hours of screen time each weekday. So that almost looks like it says per week, but it's per weekday. And then about 37% of children in that preschool age range played outdoors for less than an hour on weekdays, and 24% played outside for less than an hour on weekend days. So if we think about conceptions of childhood. When most of us were younger, we often think about time outdoors as being an integral part of childhood. But the data that we're seeing in the modern time shows that even from very young, our children are spending a lot more time on screens and a lot less time outside. Um, we know that there are a lot of families, a lot of schools, a lot of organizations like all of us here who are looking for ways to get outside back into the mix of activities that are normal for young children and for children of all ages to enhance their health and well-being. But unfortunately, there are varying levels of comfort with nature and being outside among the adults who lead those spaces. And so that's really where experts like you, and you are an expert, we're going to talk about that more shortly, come in handy to help us find solutions to some of those barriers. And if you're not sure how you can possibly help with this, don't worry, that's what we're going to be talking about today. So I never really know what to expect when I'm doing a presentation for Texas Children in Nature Network, except that we all have a couple things in common, which is we like to see children in nature. So before we really jump in any further, I want to get a sense of who's here today. Again, I told you I'm going to ask you to put a lot of stuff in the chat throughout our time together because it's going to help us engage a little bit more. But if right now, starting out, can you tell us, I can see your names, if, assuming your name is accurate. If not, you need to tell Sarah, apparently. But if you can let us know your organization, your title or role within that organization, that's a starting point, just so we can get a sense of who are you and sort of where are you positioned within your professional sphere. So we have a master naturalist. We have Sarah, who's leading Texas Children in Nature Network, Green Schoolyard Coordinator, Research Associate and Educational Program Developer, Owner and Designer. Okay, so we have a little bit of a range: climate action resilience, engaging youth. Okay, so we have a little bit of a range there, a lot of different kinds of expertise, but we also know that your job title doesn't really sum you up as a person or a professional, or at least I can tell you mine doesn't. My job title is Assistant Professor and Extension Specialist for Promoting Early Education Quality, which is a lot of words, and I'm not sure any of them tells you a lot about who I really am as a person. So just to dive one step deeper, I'd like us to respond again. But this time, instead of thinking about our titles and sort of our professional roles, I want each person to list 3 things that you are an expert about. Don't overthink this because I believe everyone is an expert at something, and it doesn't even have to be relevant to our topic today. Of course, it's helpful if you're thinking about your expertise as it relates to children being in nature. But 3 things that you have special knowledge or special skills or both. I'm going to put mine in there, and mine are very specific to what I do in my professional life, but yours don't have to be. Wildlife and ecology management, ecological education, biological education, general knowledge of nature. I love that. These are really just a summary of things you're good at. Zoom is definitely a skill set. Okay, I hope everyone's following all of these because there's some great stuff here. Building programs, building things, building experiences, building knowledge bases. There's a lot of capacity here. Um, yes, Cheryl, you should have said storybooks. Bilingual nature educator. I love that. Okay, so we have a lot of different kinds of expertise, and I think that's really what I want everybody to just be reflecting on as we go through all of this. I think we can safely assume you are here on a meeting on behalf of the Texas Children in Nature Network. So I am going to assume that you have at least a passing interest in how you can use that expertise to connect, I don't know, children with nature. That's a pretty fair assumption, I would hope. So that's going to be the framework that we're looking through as we go through this. But before we move on, I do also recognize that different people come to trainings with different ideas, different expectations, different motivations, different goals, different things we hope to hear about or learn. So one more sort of call and response moment before we move forward. And I just want, in one sentence or less, give me a quick bite about what you hope to leave today's webinar with. Obviously, and the caveat, the disclaimer is I have already prepared these slides. I will not be editing as we go. So I can't guarantee that everything you want is going to be in here. But if it's not here, then that's an opportunity for myself, and I can, contact Sarah, and we can work together to figure out how to make sure that that need gets filled in a different way if it's not filled today. So give me a one sentence or less about what you hope to walk away with today. Something you hope to learn, something you hope, an idea you hope will be sparked. I'm just here because I needed some continuing education. And I'm just watching right now. I love that word influence, Becky. I hate how it's used in pop culture, but I do believe that we all have a responsibility to exercise our influence. So we're looking for ideas, we're looking for inspiration, we're looking for things we can apply in our work. We're looking for opportunities in some cases, very specific calls to action that we can help fulfill. And those are all really meaningful things. And I think all of those are hopefully things that we can touch upon either in today's training or in the resource that I'm going to introduce you to at the end of this training. And obviously, Texas Children in Nature Network is the right place to be with those goals and objectives in mind. So, I want to tell you a little bit about my goals for today and what I hope to bring to you. The main focus of our talk today is thinking about how your expertise can help some of our youngest children connect with nature. And as we think through that, we're going to reflect on some of what's unique about early childhood as an opportunity. In early childhood, we have some opportunities to support healthy long-term development that are even more impactful in some ways than when we try to engage older children. Not to say we shouldn't continue to engage older children, but we have some kind of unique opportunities in those first few years of life. Then we'll consider how your expertise can help connect young children with outdoor and nature experiences that contribute to their healthy development, both now, short term, and throughout the rest of their lives. So you can actually have an effect on the future through this work, which is amazing. And then we'll connect you to a resource that will equip you to better leverage your knowledge and skills so you can use them for the benefit of what we like to call our Tiny Texans. So I like to do a little bit of level setting when I have this conversation, and it sounds like we have folks that are coming from slightly different backgrounds and lenses, and I'm just going to tell you first and foremost, I'm an early childhood person. That is my background. I'm an early childhood person who happens to also be passionate about connecting children with nature, but my primary identity is in how do we promote high quality early care and education writ large across the board. But I know from what you've just told me that some of you are coming from the nature side of that fence, and you have developed a passion for connecting children into that. And so I think just before we get started, it's helpful to give a glossary, a little overview of what some jargon words mean that are common in my industry, but may not be common in your home turf industry. Um, and these are just vocabulary words for the day. So the first one is early childhood. Early childhood refers to the period from birth to 8 years old. So this period is crucial in child development because babies are born um, somewhat underdeveloped relative to other mammals. If you look at brain development in many other mammals versus human children, human children are slightly less developed in a lot of ways than a lot of our counterparts. And so our brains and our bodies are growing rapidly and changing rapidly and very subject to influence during those first couple years of life. Um, Young children in the birth to 8 range are building their first relationships, they're building their self-confidence, they're learning habits, some of which we hope are healthy, not unhealthy. And all of those experiences that they have are what shapes their brain development. Literally, it affects the physical structure of their brains because their brains are building based on what they experience to sort of optimize the system for the world it's going to live in. But it also is habit development and exposure to things we want them to be comfortable with and love and seek out as they grow throughout the rest of their lives. Early childhood education, you saw ECE was part of the title of this. ECE needs you, but what is ECE? Early childhood education it's a really catch-all term that refers to the settings where young children receive care and they have learning experiences when they're not with their families. So these programs go by a lot of different names. You might hear childcare, you might hear preschool, you might hear pre-K, you might hear child development centers, Montessori schools. You might hear people say daycare, but that's a dirty word in my industry. So see, there's that contextual knowledge that's just helpful to know. They might report to one or more of a couple different regulatory agencies and programs. So they might have inspectors from child care regulation that are holding them accountable for one set of rules and also be reporting to the Texas Workforce Commission as part of the Texas Rising Star Quality Program. Some of them are public school pre-K that report to TEA, Texas Education Agency. There's different funding models. So there's a lot of complexity just in this early childhood education space. And it's important to know that if these are audiences you want to be able to work with, because it really is its own language. And if we're doing a needs assessment and trying to understand how to speak to our audience, knowing who they're reporting to, what rules they're required to follow, where their money comes from, what outcomes they're needing to report to different people. All of those things help us set a plan that's going to appeal to them most effectively. But all of them serve a common purpose, and that it's a dual purpose. They serve the dual purposes of providing safe places for children to go while their parents work and providing opportunities to support learning and development. Some of them do those things better than others, but that's the goal with all of them, is they are all really doing that work. We also, the people who work in those settings, we often refer to them as early childhood educators or early childhood professionals. So while in a school like a K-12 school, you might have teachers and you might have principals in those administrative roles. In the early childhood space, more often you have teachers or caregivers, and then they're reporting to a director. So some of those just nuances of language are helpful to know. Um, And so those early childhood educators are the people who provide the care, they're the people who create the environments, and they also plan and implement the learning opportunities for young children in those early childhood education settings. And one thing that makes all of this super fun is that we know that young children learn best, their development is most supported when they're learning through play. And so play-based learning is exactly what it sounds like. It's children engaging in playful activities that allow them to practice skills across all different areas of development. So they're learning to move their bodies, they're learning how to talk, they're practicing talking, practicing having conversations, they're practicing the skill of making friends. They're practicing how to solve problems, which means they have to encounter problems. So they have to be engaged in experiences that aren't always fully controlled, because when adults design controlled experiences, we often plan out as many of the problems as possible rather than letting them experience the problem and kind of just giving them a chance to see how they do with it. So it's vitally important for children to have time to play both inside and outside. And then the last part is early childhood development. So this process that's happening, whether we like it or not, where children are growing and they're developing new skills, they're learning new skills, their brains are building, all these things are happening at the same time. And when those things are happening, we refer to those processes collectively as early childhood development. And so we call the whole process early childhood development, and it happens in a very whole child way. We don't separate out, today we're only going to develop your language. We're going to just work on talking, because we can't, because every minute is an opportunity to develop across the entire child. But for science purposes and for planning purposes, we do tend to break things down into different areas. It just makes it easier for us to study how development happens. It makes it easier to talk about things. It can make it easier to plan interventions or activities or learning experiences that support specific skills within that really complex web of everything that's happening in a young child. And so there's lots of different ways to categorize the chunks of development that are happening all at the same time. One of the simplest, and the one that the state of Texas uses in the Texas Infant, Toddler, and 3-year-old Early Learning Guidelines, is the 4-domain system. So physical development, cognitive development, language development, and social emotional development. We don't have time today to go into the nuances of each domain. I have entire hour-long presentations on each one of these, and those are not even a comprehensive look at everything that's happening within each one. But we are going to look a little bit at each one so that you have a high-level overview of, I'll just give you some highlights of what are the big things happening in each domain during the first few years of life. And then what are the big overarching goals that we're hoping children are achieving in each of those areas? And I think that part is important because as we think about, again, if we're supporting early childhood programs or we're trying to support young children being in nature, we want to make sure that we're doing that consistent with goals that are appropriate for them and sort of the level that they're at. And a 2-year-old is very different than a 12-year-old. So one thing I didn't ask, and I already know the answer for a couple of you, but what age groups of children have you worked with the most? Let's put that in the chat. Then we're going to look at these a little more closely, but I just realized I probably should have had that in my little intro questions. 3 to 4-year-olds. A broad range, but background was secondary, college mostly, but expanding into K-12, high school originally, but more recently pre-K. Okay. So I see this a lot, especially when we're working in cross-sector work like this, where We often have people, I work a lot with public health people, I work with a lot of outdoor nature people. And a lot of times their comfort zone, your comfort zone is older kids. And sometimes we think we can just simplify and shrink and it will be appropriate for younger kids. And that's not always universally true. And part of that is because the goals are so different, right? If you've worked with those older kids, you know there's usually a set of curriculum objectives. Some, if you're, working in public schools, that's probably the TEKS. But if you're, depending on where you are, there's learning objectives that you're trying to help them learn. Um, it looks a little different when we're talking about the youngest children because we're still building the architecture. I like to say, if back up. Imagine that you got a new tablet and you take it out of the box, you open the box, and all the pieces are laying there, but they're not connected to one another yet. Would you be able to just, even if you could turn it on, would you be able to run apps and download files and do all the things on that tablet that you would like it to do? Absolutely not, right? It doesn't work that way. So, what we know about the human brain is that, especially in the first 5 years of life, the actual physical structure is still developing. You're still assembling the device. And that's a different process than just trying to download files, which is, in my opinion, teaching knowledge, right? When we want kids to remember facts and recall to them and things like that, um, that's absolutely downloading files. And running apps is like learning how to learn, and learning kind of the skills. So we're learning STEM skills, we're learning reading skills. We're not even to that point universally yet, right? We're at the point where from birth to 5, the goal is to build the system so that all of those other functions can run. And yes, Sarah, we are familiar with differences in these age ranges already, right? Because I've heard that too. Pre-K to 3rd grade is learning to read, and 4th grade and up is reading to learn, right? So in like pre-K to 3rd grade, we're downloading some apps. We're learning how to do the skills that will allow us to learn later, to learn more later. And then we start downloading files at that point. Then it becomes more about getting more knowledge in there so that we can do more complicated things with the apps we've downloaded. So actually, like the human brain device analogy is surprisingly adept. But all of this to say, so what are we actually trying to accomplish in early childhood? In the physical domain, that refers to growth. Like, is our body growing the way it's supposed to? Are we learning how to take care of our body in a healthy way? Learning how to use your body to do stuff. If you imagine an infant, they're essentially incapable of even not scratching themselves in the face, right? So they have to learn how to do just about everything. That also includes large motor movements, or learning how to walk, learning how to run, learning how to sit up, but also fine motor movements, which are grasping, and that leads into things like writing. In cognitive development, that's what we mean when we say learning how to think. So learning how to think, learning how to problem solve, and learning how to learn are all part of cognitive development. And we are building those skills in the first few years of life. Language development refers to receptive and expressive. So we're learning how to listen, we're learning how to speak, we're learning how to read, and we're learning how to write. And the beginnings of those skills often emerge in basically that order: listening, speaking, reading, writing. Social emotional development refers to learning to understand and regulate my own feelings, and also learning how to make friends, solve social problems, and navigate interactions with other people. Because I don't live by myself in this world, I have to learn how to engage with other people in appropriate and productive ways. So one thing that when you think about all of these, what does it look like from birth to age 8? That's a pretty staggering difference. Think about a newborn baby and think about an 8-year-old. Those are two completely different people, right? To go from newborns who can't communicate beyond crying They have to sometimes have their hands moved away from their own faces to keep from scratching themselves, to fully fledged children who are capable of riding bikes and having friendships, imagining very complex pretend play scenarios, using spoken words and written words to communicate really complicated ideas. It's really remarkable how far we come in those first 8 years of life. And each child's development depends on a whole lot of different factors, but one of the most critical, because it affects the brain, is those types of experiences they have that allow them to explore and practice all of their emerging skills. And you probably already know, because you're here at this Texas Children in Nature Network webinar, that outdoor and nature play experiences can help facilitate positive development in every single one of these areas. So we're going to quickly review some of the benefits that we know of to development, to early childhood development in each of these domains, and then think just a little bit about your role in how you can contribute to making that happen. So physical development. Physical development is how children grow and move. So obviously being outside plays a crucial role in that. Engaging in outdoor activities, children are more likely to be physically active in their play when they're outside than they are inside, both because of social expectations and the way spaces are usually designed. So being outside allows children to run and jump and climb, all of which helps strengthen their muscles. It helps build their bone density. It improves their coordination. It improves cardiovascular fitness and stamina. They tend to run faster for longer. They tend to just keep moving for longer. We also know that sunshine is great. It can contribute to vitamin D and also helps improve eyesight. So eye doctors love it when we start talking about getting kids outside more often. And pediatricians love it too, because it really builds health on top of everything else. But moving your body allows you to access other experiences, which also reinforce that brain development, which also reinforce all these other areas that we're talking about. Cognitive development. So this is how children think and learn. Being outside enhances children's exposure to a variety of different stimulation. It gives them things to be curious and ask questions about, things to explore, processes to watch. Nature is full of processes, right? It encourages them to solve problems. It encourages watching change over time, and just so many things that stimulate thinking in really complex ways. Time spent outside has been shown to increase children's attention, their concentration, and their enjoyment of learning. And when we say time spent outside, we don't just mean traditional put everybody outside and it's recess and they play on a plastic play structure, but really nature being a part of that adds even more of those stimuli that make being outside that much more valuable. They also engage more senses when they're outside, which we know helps them learn better and retain what they've learned because their brain is processing it so much more deeply. So language development, remember, it's how children learn to understand and use words, written and spoken. And you might not necessarily think that being outside is chock full of words. It's not the same as, we're sitting in a circle and we're all reading a story together. But being out in an outdoor or nature-rich environment provides a lot of opportunities to expand vocabulary. When children encounter something new, if the adult who's working with them has the words, then they can offer rich explanations, rich vocabulary exposure about plants, about animals, about processes, natural processes that are happening. One of my favorite things to do with young children is to teach about the water cycle. And we say first evaporation, then some condensation, then precipitation. And we do this over and over, and it's perfect little walk on a rainy day where we can't go too far, but we're going to go out on the playground and um, just practice our water cycle dance while we get a little bit of fresh rain on us. Um, it also encourages social interactions. So being outside in a space that allows for free play, children tend to find places and ways to play together. And that can involve social interactions with peers, social interactions with adults, turn taking and conversation, which even some grown-ups aren't very good at waiting their turn in a conversation. So it's a really important skill to practice. Um, so it really just stimulates when they start asking questions or we encourage them to describe what they're seeing. We're encouraging them to use rich descriptive words to talk about what they've experienced. Then it all just strengthens their language capabilities. And then the last one, and this is every teacher's favorite part to talk about, is the benefits to social emotional development. So remember, social emotional development is how children learn to engage with others, but also how they learn to regulate and manage and recognize their own emotions. So when children play outside, we do often see group activities, which can be structured activities, or it can be things that are set up to invite groups of children to play together. So if I have a seesaw, that's not a super fun activity if I'm solo, right? It kind of gives an invitation for multiple children to play. And there are lots of things like that. My daughter's school has they call them the circle bikes. And so they do have a bike path where they go all the way around, but they also have the circle bikes where it's like a merry-go-round that's just little tricycles and they have to pedal to make it go. And it works for one person, but it's much more fun and much faster if there's 6 of you. And so it gives them an opportunity to invite other people to come play, to make a plan, to coordinate and cooperate together. Um, it also means when children are playing together, they kind of are forced to practice things like sharing, taking turns, cooperation, and some conflict resolution because they're not always going to have the same plan and the same ideas. And so again, when grown-ups plan everything, we tend to plan out a lot of those problems, but sometimes the learning experience is situated in those problems and we need to let it happen a little more. Interacting with their peers in a natural setting also encourages things like communication and teamwork. Children build friendships, they have a sense of community, especially if we're all taking care of the garden together and we have a communal project, then it gives us a sense of community. It gives us a sense of shared ownership, shared success, shared goals. Not that we can't get that in other places, but that is a really wonderful place and way to do that. And contact with nature, like children get when they're playing outside or in nature play, also helps them with self-regulation. It helps grown-ups too. We know that there are positive benefits to mental health for everyone for spending time in nature. So we tell teachers sometimes, this is also really good for you. This is also all these regulation benefits that you're going to see for the children. It also helps you regulate your big feelings, and teachers feel big feelings too. But it also helps children control their behavior in more appropriate ways when they aren't constantly exceeding their regulatory capacity, right? So I like to say people are like cans of hairspray. We can only have our feelings get so big before they explode. And it can be pretty messy. And so being able to regulate that and kind of keep our feelings at a manageable intensity level is a really crucial part of what we're hoping children are learning during these first few years. Okay, so hopefully all that is clear as mud, and mud is a good thing in this case. We love playing in mud. It's clear that being outside and in nature are helpful for young children's development. And most children, if they have opportunities to have those experiences, really enjoy playing outside and being in nature. We see like that's not something we have to teach them. Like most children will find something they enjoy in that space. But not every grown-up has the same level of comfort with nature as each other. So you've already shared some of your areas of expertise. You've shared your professional role. You've shared a little bit about what you hope to get out of today's training and who you've worked with. But I'm going to make just a very presumptuous guess here and say you're probably not just here and not just involved in this work because you know stuff. It's probably not just because you know a lot about something or because you're good at doing something, but you're probably here because you have a positive emotional connection with something that draws you to this work. So I will tell you, even as an advocate for outdoor nature play for young children, there are some outdoor nature activities I enjoy more than others. And I'm being really honest, here in Texas, there are some times of year that I enjoy outdoor nature activities more than others. And that's fine. I think we all have preferences. We all have things we love and things we don't love as much. And some of the things that I enjoy are not necessarily things I'm good at. And some of the things I'm good at may not be the things that I enjoy the most, but that's not really why we do everything we do, right? So I'm going to take one more moment and I want you guys to share and reflect. And I think Cheryl's ahead of the game here, but this time, instead of just telling us what you're good at, tell us what you like to do when you're outside or in nature. Or what do you enjoy about being outside and in nature? If you were thinking like, I'm going to spend a day doing XYZ and it is situated outside or in nature, what is it that you're going to want to do? Cheryl said, taking pictures, seeing critters, rearranging backyard plants. I love rescuing a native plant in my yard and finding a home for it in my yard. Sarah said walking, reading, birding, investigating weird little things. Sarah, that last one is speaking my love language. Some of you know my youngest daughter was born to be outside. She's 4 years old right now, and she loves being outside more than anything else in the world. And her favorite thing to do is to go find, and this is now my favorite thing to do vicariously, is we find something weird and we Google Lens it. So when I think about outdoor and nature activities, technology is not always the first thing that comes to mind. But if you ask me this question, I would say Google lensing. That is like one of my favorite things to do. Observing birds and bugs, walking and cycling, learning. So yeah, Sharon, really ours is learning too. Being able to recognize what's going on, being excited to see it, understanding the ecological connections. Sharon, I think you and I might be soulmates here. This year I'm reading Marissa's, we're converting more backyard to native habitat. So seeing and tracking the wildlife that appear, especially pollinators and insects. And then butterflies, bird watching, planting pollinators, finding an awe moment. Yeah, so there's a lot of wonder that we can find when we're doing something we enjoy. I will tell you my favorite thing to do outside is not splashing in puddles. It's not my favorite thing. Doesn't mean it's not your favorite thing or someone else's. It's certainly my 4-year-old's one of her favorite things. But we all have different preferences. We all have different passions. Some of these are easier to translate into an educational space than others, but all of them are very informative as we think through what that can look like. So thank you for sharing those connections. Now we know what you're good at. We know what you enjoy. And we know basically that's your bucket of expertise that you can bring to young children in some way. And wouldn't it be great to know, if there's something that you love doing, if you love birding, if you love planting pollinators and cultivating pollinators, wouldn't it be wonderful to know that there's a whole nother generation who can share that expertise and carry those passions forward into the future? I think one of the saddest things to think about when we think about things we love is that it ends with us, right? So part of the joy in that is to be able to share it and ensure that it has a life moving forward into the future. And you're here today. So again, you probably already understand the power of cultivating that for outdoors and nature in youth and children. And so the next step, the call to action today, is to think about how to plug that into the spaces where the youngest children, who are the most impressionable, who are the most receptive minds on the entire planet, who are the most malleable, you can infuse your passions in them much more easily and with much more longevity than even the older children. And they're spending their time in early childhood education programs. So if we can influence and impact those programs, we have a real opportunity to carry forward some of those passions and some of that expertise into the future. And you're probably like, okay, Jodi, that's you said that like it was really simple. And is it that simple? And the answer is yes and no. So naturally, some outdoor nature play activities are harder to directly copy and paste into an early childhood education environment than others. For example, none of you said this, but let's say your passion is exploring caves. That's your absolute passion. That is the thing that you want the next generation to love. You're gonna find it hard to translate that into an early learning setting with all those pesky safety rules and requirements they have in place. We can't take anyone on a field trip till they're 4, and then there's like a 3-page list of safety rules they have to follow to be able to do that. And I'm just pretty sure that caving probably isn't gonna work in most of those cases. Um, it's an unfortunate reality. But you can help teachers think about how they can teach children about caves in their programs in developmentally appropriate ways. You could give them tips on good books to read. You could help by sharing photos of real cave adventures or recording a video walkthrough with age appropriate explanations of what you're seeing on one of your cave adventures. You could help them think about how to create a pretend play center that's a cave exploration area in their indoor classroom, or even better, outside in their outdoor learning environment. And so for many of you, based on the things you've said, the expertise and passions that you have translate much more directly into support for early childhood educators. As early childhood programs are working to bring more nature into their environments and to create high quality outdoor learning environments with lots of natural elements, the number one concern or piece of feedback that we hear is they are not confident in their ability to maintain those spaces. So, questions to ask yourself. Do you have the expertise or the passion or the knowledge to help them choose the right plants? Can you help them figure out what that weird insect is that's living in the shrubs? Can you help them know when to plant different herbs and vegetables for the best chance of success in your climate zone? Can you help them identify the different birds who are visiting their outdoor learning environment and give them details about their unique songs, their life cycles, their fun features that they can share with the children? Can you help them source natural materials that the children can play with indoors or outdoors? Can you help them create fun areas using natural elements? And you don't have to have answers. Those are all rhetorical questions for our purposes today. Um, and you might be thinking like, yes, I know it's good for kids to be outside and in nature. That's why I'm at a Texas Children in Nature Network webinar. Yes, I know I have skills and interests and stuff that I could share, but I have absolutely no idea how to find these people, how to talk to them, or what to do that will actually be helpful for them. Well, have I got a deal for you? In partnership with the Texas Department of State Health Services, we at Texas A&M AgriLife Extension have an opportunity for you to take a training to learn more about our state's targeted approach to facilitating more outdoor nature play for young children. They're research-based, naturalized outdoor learning environments. This is called the OLE Texas movement. And OLE Texas promotes 12 best practices for outdoor learning environment design, which science shows can help young children reap all those developmental benefits that we talked about earlier. Um, so our online course, Nature Play for Tiny Texans, includes a deeper overview of early development. So we glossed over that today, but it goes into more depth about some of those things and tells you where to go to learn more. It gives more details about the rules and regulations and realities that early childhood professionals face in some of those different settings where they are actually providing these learning experiences. It gives a closer look at the OLE Texas best practice design indicators. And it talks very specifically about how people with knowledge and skills like yours can help bring those to life for early childhood professionals in their spaces or for young children in those early childhood education spaces. It includes some very specific ideas for green industry, parks and recreation, nature programming, nature education, conservation education, folks that are working in industries like yours, and other kind of nature adjacent professionals, even including it was really designed for our master gardener and master naturalist volunteers and our industry friends. But the idea is, how can you build out offerings in your business model or your program models? How can you create a training that will help these teachers do this well? How can you create a tip sheet that will help them? How can you create a display in your nursery or garden center? How can you work with local partners to help coordinate support that would be beneficial? So the idea being, there's someone in this group who knows something that you could bring to life for young children in those spaces. And this course really dives into a lot of the meat about how to do that and different options. The best part, though, is that the Texas Department of State Health Services is picking up the check for a select number of people to take the Nature Play for Tiny Texans course. So if you are ready to take that leap out of that fun climbing tree we saw on the last slide, and you really want to help our youngest, again, most receptive Texans inherit your love of nature, then you can reach out to us. This is obviously not my name. You see, my name was Jodi Nerren. This is pointing you to Alexis Cordova. Alexis is our health promotion project specialist. So she works on my team, and she's the one who can get you plugged directly into that Nature Play for Tiny Texans course. And you can reach her at alexis.cordova@ag.tamu.edu. So we have just a couple minutes. That was a whole lot of things that I just threw out at you in very quick succession, but does anyone have questions? I know that some of the unanswered questions are answered in Nature Play for Tiny Texans, so without completely reteaching that, I was trying to think of what I could tell you today that would be a helpful starting point.
I don't have any questions in the chat yet, but we have a small enough group. If folks want to take themselves off mute and ask a question,
Yeah,
you're more than
please
welcome.
do.
I will say, as y'all are thinking of questions, we do have an evaluation, and all of us who work in education know how important evaluation is. So if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to fill out our evaluation, that would be great. And our next webinar is a community of childhood conservationists, and putting the link for that in the chat as well.
Maybe not questions. Does anyone have an idea of something that you thought about today that you were like, oh, I could turn this into an idea I could share with early childhood professionals? Or I could turn this into a resource or a program that could work for young children.
I will also say, if anyone is interested in working with early childhood, not even sure where to start, we have what we call the Pathfinders Network. It's part of Texas Children and Nature Network. So if you're interested in joining that, we would love to have you. And then we do have a question from Sharon. You've mentioned
Yeah, so
that
I
early
see Sharon's
childhood.
question is about early childhood is birth through age 8, and does it include tips on how to help build material that specializes across that age range? So Sharon, full disclosure, the Ole Texas initiative is very much focused on early learning settings, which primarily work with children birth to 5. And it's the primary target is to impact early childhood education spaces, a lot of which operate in the childcare sector. So what we know is, public pre-K does fall within that, and public schools do fall within that age range. But often the structures you have to impact, administrative structures you have to impact to affect change in those spaces are very different. So the main focus of Nature Play for Tiny Texans is the childcare sector, and what rules do childcare programs have to follow, and how can you create, like, what are their training requirements, and what are their regulatory limitations and their resource needs, and how does that work. We do talk about what development looks like across that whole range to a certain extent, but it really does, there is more of a focus on birth to 5, because that tends to be the most underserved of all the segments of that population. However, we do point to, like, the Texas pre-K guidelines and give some thoughts about how outdoor, creating information that helps teachers understand how outdoor and nature play experiences can support learning across all of those components of the Texas pre-kindergarten guidelines is a really powerful way to help them. And if you have curriculum pieces or activity suggestions that are PKG aligned, that definitely carries more weight, just like a TEKS aligned curriculum carries more weight and is more likely to get picked up and used than something that's just pulled together that's cute or might be appropriate in informal education but doesn't translate well into the formal classroom. So we do kind of talk about those distinctions. And the good news is it's free. So even if you take it and you realize it's maybe a little bit left of what your target you were aiming for, then you haven't necessarily lost an investment other than your time, which I know is very valuable, but
Okay. Any other questions? Well, thank you, Jodi, so much for your time. Appreciate you presenting with us this afternoon. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And I hope everyone gets to enjoy the rest of their day and gets to experience some time outside. So, thank you so much, everyone.